welcome to the Freedom Podcast. David, how are you?
I'm great, Josh. I'm great.
We just had to do a second start to this podcast because I started the last one with "Hello, Dave," and I thought that wasn't really a great introduction to the podcast. So
But the best thing is
now we've got
we've now just told everybody that as well. So
yeah, well, there you go.
Who knows? There you go.
David, how are you?
Mate, I'm great. Come on. We had a great Thanksgiving, didn't we, Josh? You nailed
Wonderful.
the food.
Thank
it was
you,
absolutely fantastic. Come on.
And you had Christmas at the same time, didn't you, with your parents at the weekend?
Yeah, come on, look, we've got the Christmas tree up already, which is a week
looks
early
like a real
for us.
tree, Dave.
Mate, it is a real tree. We went to a store to look at fake trees. Okay, I love my parents, but something died inside me when my parents bought a fake tree when I was a kid. You know, it was just too sensible. It was too reasonable. It was like, of course we saved money over 10 years. That's not what a Christmas tree's about, Joshua. It's about an unnecessary spend of Christmas joy, and I just couldn't bring myself to it. And I love my parents dearly. If they ever listen to this, I maybe did say that to them when they were here this time. So it's a real Christmas tree.
Yeah. So it's November, but you've already got the tree up. You're well and truly embracing your American connection and culture.
Come on, y'all. Yes. You know, Thanksgiving's over. Fall is done. Christmas is on. No, my parents were actually in town, so we did a bit of a fake Christmas day with them. And, you know, we obviously detoured around some food last time, Josh, but I cooked a beef chuck in red wine for 14 hours. It was outstanding.
Sounds
so there
amazing.
You go. Yeah, it was
Sounds
great.
incredible. When you were growing up, when did the tree go up in your house?
Do you know what? I think it was like maybe second week of December, third week of December. It was, you know, it wasn't super early.
Ours was the second weekend of December. And a good friend of mine, Manning here, shout out to Manning if she's listening.
Come on, Manning.
She was insistent on us this weekend after Thanksgiving getting our tree up. Hers has already been up 3 weeks. So she's like, what are you even doing? It's like, this is the time to enjoy it. So it is very different culturally here to get your tree up, get your Christmas decorations going. But also I think that as Brits, you keep the tree up for longer, don't you? I mean, it goes into kind of first week of January, really. It's still up.
Yeah. I think that's why ours never went up that early, because it stays up longer. So,
but Manning, I think she's like on Christmas afternoon, she's like chucking the tree out. She has had enough by that point. So,
season
Dave,
change.
I was there last night at Academy Plus. We do Academy Plus, which is our training program for leaders here in the US. We do it around the world. It's amazing. I love Academy. I love Academy Plus. We've been doing it for over a decade now and just seen so much momentum through it. So many people raised up, so many impactful times, as we don't just focus on what you know. It's not just like a knowledgeable or informational program. It's about coming and recognizing really about who we are in Jesus. So not only learning things about the Bible and who God is, but actually discovering who we are within him. And we were doing a session last night all around eternity. And we got to watch some of the content from 2018 from The Cave. And we do our annual conference, The Cave, where we gather our church internally. So our Sundays are often we want to reach new people. We've got a salvation message. Where once a year we do something internal where it's like, this is for our church people. We do The Cave. It's an epic time. And God speaks to us powerfully. And in 2018, we did The Cave. And we got to watch your message, Dave. And Dave, you had some great hair in 2018.
Oh, mate.
It was high. There was the skinny jeans. There was a white T-shirt. And there was some boots. It was a great look.
Mate, Saz and I were going through the Freedom app the other day trying to find some old messages, and I found one of mine, and I said to her, how on earth did you ever let me get on stage with that hairstyle? It was terrible. It was terrible.
Funny story. I first met Dave back in 2007. 2006, 7, something like that.
2007.
And I knew that he was on the scene. Like we'd heard, he was connecting in with Chris and Karen Cook, and they were having him over for dinner. We were there doing a prayer meeting, and I went down and I met Dave for the first time. And you get a first impression from someone, don't you? And I remember Dave was wearing a short sleeve red check shirt, but he also, I thought, that guy's got good hair. And my other first impression was he had very small ears.
There you go.
So those are my first two thoughts. Good hair, small ears. But hey, there you go. So anyway, as we were watching this eternity message last night, I was actually really impacted by it. And it took me back to that season in our church where we did the Eternity Cave, and it was inspired by the book we read by John Bevere, Driven by Eternity. And if you haven't read that book, you should definitely take some time to read it. I found it one of the most impactful books I've read. And actually, I don't know if you've seen this, Dave, but Spotify Premium are now doing audiobooks included in your subscription. So
amazing.
You can actually get Driven by Eternity on Spotify, and you can listen to it as part of your membership if you've got one.
No way.
And yeah, it's like, I think it's maybe 15 hours a month you can do on audiobooks. But incredible. I would highly recommend, maybe it's after this podcast, go and listen to that, and it will impact you. I haven't listened to the audiobook myself, but I heard it's really good because there's a story in it and they bring it to life. But I remember, Dave, us all going through that as a church and how impactful it was. And I thought it would be great to just bring that to the podcast today and almost reflect on the teaching of eternity and the way that it influences and impacts the way that we live. But just rewinding, Dave, to those 5.5 years ago when we were kind of going through this as a church, what did that do in you personally? What do you remember from that time, and how did it impact you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's such a challenging book because the front half of the book, Josh, isn't it? It's what's called an allegory. So it's almost like a fiction, non-fiction take of 4 or 5 characters and their moment in front of God and accounting for their life. And I think that really was kind of one of the big things that it impacted me, was really, am I living today in light of the fact that I'm going to account? And of course, if you've been around church, you know that that's part of the theology of what the Bible teaches. And we can know that that's a theological truth, but am I living today? Am I speaking to my neighbors? Am I speaking to my friends? Am I living today in light of that? And probably one of the biggest things that I remember just very vividly is as soon as you asked that question, this was probably the most impactful thing was, I come from pretty much a vast majority of my family are non-Christians, amazing people, love them. They're great. And, I became a Christian in the year 2000, so 23, 24 years ago now. And the first couple of years, I was passionate. I was determined. I wanted to share my faith and, probably did that badly at times as well. But the thing that impacted me when I read Driven by Eternity was that I'd become apathetic about my family's salvation and faith. At that point, it was 17 years, after the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I kind of had almost accepted the status quo of it. And I remember reading through the book. It took me a year to read through the book, partly because I'm a terrible reader, partly because I get to these points and I just have to pause. And I can't read on until I process that. And so I think the very first thing that comes back to mind as I think back going through it is, it was a very vivid challenge around, am I living in light of eternity? And a very personal one of, where's my passion? Am I praying for my family's salvation? Am I, wanting to bring up conversations of faith? And Saz and I, we love evangelizing, we love reaching people. So, that it wasn't like that part of our life was dormant. We had people that we were reaching, but in our family, some of those people that perhaps we've been trying to witness to for 20, 30 years, it was almost like this thing of don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. Eternity's on the line here, eternity's on the line. So that's the thing that I think first comes to mind for me personally. For us as a church, the most vivid thing is, I think, weirdly, it brought like a wave of purity. So I'll never forget going to that cave. I'm not going to say who, they'll know who they are. There was somebody that had not long joined our church, maybe 6 or 9 months, and they come to that first cave, a fella from one of our UK campuses. And I said hello to him about 3 times through the cave, and he couldn't talk. He just didn't really, he was just like, yes, because the weight of that call to holiness. And I think I know, like, for a lot of people, it brought that home. And I know a lot of people made changes. A lot of people, there were lifestyle choices, there were relationship changes, there were all these sorts of different things. Some, it was a context of people stopping doing things they shouldn't do, and others, it was like starting things they should. But I think on a personal note, it was this call to, am I still as fervently reaching the people around me as I was? And corporately, when we looked at eternity, it was like, man, I need to make some shifts in my life. Those are the 2 vivid memories for me, I think.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it was an incredibly impactful time for us as a church, but also as a leadership team. And I remember reading the book personally. We were doing academy. I was running academy at the time, and we took our academy over to Worcester because we were doing academy on tour, where we take the academy around to some of our UK churches, and they go and see different expressions of how we're doing church and what God's doing in our different churches in the UK and beyond. And it was a really great time. But as I took the students there, they would then be getting involved in serving teams in the morning, and I took the time then to go into town, take the book with me, and read another chapter. And I remember reading this chapter in this little cafe in Worcester that I'd never been to before and had never been back to since. Like, it's just this unique moment in my life. And as I was reading it, it was almost like the clock stopped in the room. Like, something impacted me in that chapter, which was the revelation of how significant eternity is, and how important it is that we need to treat it, think about it, dwell on it, reflect on it. Because when I was sat there in this cafe, it was almost like there was nothing else going on in the world at that moment. It was just like I was frozen in time, just completely absorbed and taken in by this moment where it felt like the clock had stopped and God was giving me this revelation of the importance and significance of eternity. And I want that for every person that's listened to this podcast, that we could get that revelation, because it does shape the way that you live. And I think about some of the things that changed in my life off the back of that. It was almost like I took on board the weight of eternity and how that would then shape my everyday. Was it for you, Dave? Was there anything particularly, do you remember it shaping within you or changing within you at that time?
As an individual, like my day-to-day rhythm, that kind of thing. I think similar to you. I think probably one of the big things is, where am I wasting time with my day? Where am I wasting time where I could be praying, where I could be, making a difference, where I could be reaching? I think that was some of the big stuff really out of it, because I think, we know we can't earn God's love. That's not what the book talks about. But when you sit there and you start thinking about what's the conversation I'm going to have with my maker, with my creator, with the one that put potential and purpose within my veins. And the difference between the conversation, what's the conversation I'm going to have with him if I go now, what's the conversation I want to have with him if I can change today? And I think that was something that really impacted me. I think it changed the way I prayed, and changed the purpose of that. I think also, obviously, like, if you haven't read the book yet, you're probably going to get a little bit of an impression from Josh and I. There is an awe about, and there is a depth, and there's a fear of God, and there's a challenge that comes through it. But also, I think I got quite excited about the fact that, oh my goodness, eternity is real, and actually, the reality of what we're going to exist in is going to so outshine and so outlive and so outlast these days. And so I think, honestly, it made me less worried about certain things, Josh. If I think back to like 2017, I can actually mark that as a year where I got set free from some fears. And I think now probably it was actually an element of that was like, hang on a second, I'm eternal. I don't need to give my time. I don't need to give my mind to this. That's a speck of dust. And it's not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much as it mattered yesterday before I realized that it's just going to be minuscule.
Definitely. In Matthew 12, verse 36 and 37, it says this in the Amplified, but I tell you, on the day of judgment, men will have to give account for every idle word that they speak. Ooh. For by your words you will be justified and acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned and sentenced. And I think that one of the big impacts on me was the weight of judgment, and feeling like that there was sometimes an almost immature understanding of eternity, which is like green light, red light. Like, you got in, it's an in or out system. It's like Father Christmas's naughty and nice list. It's like the naughty's the nice. And it's much more complex than that. It's not just about yes or no. I think that's obviously for a certain aspect of salvation, but actually that our experience of eternity will be reflected on the way that we've lived our lives as believers. And I heard this yesterday, that actually it's about our faithfulness to Jesus as Lord. That's what our eternity is. How faithful were we when we made Jesus Lord of our lives? What did that faithfulness look like? And I think that even this thing of like, you'll be measured by every word that you spoke. I think what it put on me was this idea and importance of like every deed and every hour and every day matters. And I think it's very easy to get absorbed into I will do it next week, or I'll do better next time, or whatever it might be, where actually you'll never get this day again. It's part of your ledger. It's part of your account that you will give. And sometimes I think we put off those things, or we don't maximize. And what I felt was that I made more of the life that was given me. It created this foundation of, there is this significance to the life that I've been given today, and I need to make the most of it, because I won't get it back. It's an opportunity that God's given me, and I want to steward it well, because it will matter in eternity.
Yeah, man. And when you start thinking about it and you start putting it like that, it connects in my mind to our DNA LFDE, live full and die empty. It's easy, even Saz, she's skydiving in the picture, and we talk a lot about, riding the bull and, doing something different and all those kind of things. But actually the power of LFDE is in exactly what you just said, which is, we need to live full and empty the tank, die empty, because of actually the weight of eternity and the weight of what we'll answer for. I think, that scripture you just mentioned, that jogged my memory, because I remember reading that in that season as well. And that whole thing of every empty word you say. And I think one of the things I remember looking back and just realizing is, man, I have quite a long list of unfulfilled promises. Unfulfilled, oh yeah, I'll do that, or yeah, I'll get back to, and I remember that being a time of, and I'm not perfect in that now, nobody is, but I know that, like, I'm sure I still got areas to grow in it, but that was one of the things of like, man, what if every time I committed to something, I thought, I'm going to answer for that. What if every time I said something, I'm going to answer? Oh, what if I answer? And it changes your every day. It literally changes everything about you. I do remember Josh saying to myself back then, I'm going to read this book every couple of years. I haven't read it since, but I actually thought about it the other day. I thought it's probably coming about that time that I need a
Yeah.
refresh.
That's it. Well, you need a year to get through it, so you better get started.
No, mate, I got Spotify now.
I was going to say the audiobook, I think will probably that'll hit you, especially when you can put it on 1.25 speed or whatever you like.
Double time.
Yeah. You'll get through it. But I think it's a really good and healthy reflection for us to come back to as Christians. And that's why I want to talk about on this podcast today, because I know that there's be a number of people that heard those messages that were very shaped by them. You need to go back. Actually, if you go back and check on our YouTube, you can plug into some of the material that we did from 2018. If you just go on to YouTube on Freedom Church and you search the Eternity Cave or Cave 2018, you'll find a whole playlist of videos, and they are so good. I got to watch some of them again last night as I saw you in your white t-shirt. But I think that even as I was watching those, we obviously did those dramatizations that Saz put together of bringing the characters to life from that story. And oh my gosh, there was some powerful stuff in there. Like last night, I was watching the girls just weeping because it is so powerful. So I encourage you off the back of this, it's really good to almost go and reflect back on these truths again and come back to it, because we can so easily almost get sucked back into just seeing the temporal, just seeing what's in front of us in the flesh, and forgetting we're eternal beings, that we're going to another place from here. And keeping that in our hearts and minds, it actually informs the way that we live every day. I remember one of the ways that impacted me was just around money and generosity, and just this revelation that actually everything that I spend now for the kingdom, it multiplies 100, 1,000 times for every penny, for every dollar that I would spend for eternity, because God rewards us for when we give and we are generous in that way. It's because it's a kingdom and an eternal mindset, where in regards to, like, we obviously have so many needs and things that we want and desire in our lives, but all of those things, they degrade, they go away. When you put things in that pot, it lasts forever. So that was one of the ways it impacted me, and just the way I was living every day was actually just the way that I handled and used money.
Yeah, mate, 100%. I think everything from that through to our relationships, through to, even opportunities, like you said, making the most of the day, because there is an impact. I think one of the things that I love about the book and the season and having a time where we think about eternity is that accountability isn't just about what we shouldn't be doing. It's actually about what we're investing into for the future, and actually what we're sowing and what we're living for that's bigger than that. And I think even, not even last year, this year, we launched the 72 vision, which is again like a fresh opportunity in our church to say, do you know what, I'm going to sow my life. I'm going to put my life and I'm going to give everything that I am into the cause of God's kingdom and his church and the gospel. And when you think about that from an eternal perspective, it does completely transform your mentality to what you have to sacrifice. And of course there are sacrifices, and of course there are tough times, but actually when you think that you're receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, an investment that's, tens, if not hundreds, greater in whatever fashion that is than whatever you've put in, it's a totally different mindset, I heard somebody say, Josh, our friend Josh Robury at ARC, I watched a little clip of him being interviewed, and somebody said, what's one tip you'd give to pastors in ministry? He said, people are your priority. And what that strikes me is it comes back to living our today for someone else's eternity. And when you start to filter your decisions, your money, your choice, your lifestyle, your family, your direction for someone else's eternity, mate, it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer.
Definitely. And I think that we've got to remember that no one talked about hell more than Jesus in the Bible,
Mm.
that there's a very real and present reality of the fact that there are two places we end up, and it's either heaven or hell. And I think
Yeah.
that when you actually open your eyes to that fact, that it's not just nice for people to come along to our church because, oh, they get to be a part of our community, or, you know, get to unlock, you know, some of the things within them. It's going to save them from damnation. It's that we want to see people rescued from that place. This is a rescue mission. Once you get that transfixed in your mind, you are so much more motivated to reach and save people and see people delivered from that place through Jesus because of that revelation. But if you don't want to look at hell because it's a little bit scary or unnerving or can be uncomfortable, there's questions that you have that can't be fully answered, you will miss out on that motivation that you can get from seeing, I don't want to see people end up in that place. I want to see people have the humility to accept Jesus, to get the opportunity to hear the gospel and be saved for eternity. And that's why this is the greatest thing that we can do with our lives, is build his kingdom, build his church, see people come to Jesus and be saved. But that's why we celebrate on Sundays. It's like, this wasn't just, oh, this is nice, you know, this is going to improve their lives here on earth. It's going to change their eternity forever.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. And I think we're too afraid as Christians to talk about that part of our beliefs, but it's actually essential. It's not like like you just said, you know, it's not like and it's an essential reality as to why we believe, you know, the existence of hell, a reality without God for all of our existence. That's what makes grace beautiful. That's what makes what Jesus did on the cross amazing. You know, that's what, and I think people are so afraid to talk about it because we've fused it with this idea that if you talk about that you're judging somebody. We're all in the same boat, you know, and actually when we realize that what we all deserved was that, it makes you so much more grateful even for what Jesus has done, you know. And we talked last week about joy. We talk about, you know, we talk in Freedom a lot about, you know, passion and wildfire and expression and thankfulness and gratitude and all these kind of things. If we think we deserve heaven, but we might miss out if we're bad enough, that's not the Christian theology. None of us do. We all deserve hell, but we're going to miss out on that because of the beauty and the grace of Jesus. Yeah. And I think it's so important for us to have a solid theology on that, because like you said, it will completely change the way we view, you know, what we give our lives to and reaching people around us. And it is so important. But it's easier. Here's the reality, Josh. It's easier not to, isn't it? It's easier to not think about it. It's easier to not. And so again, might be if you're listening to this is a part of Christianity you've never explored. It's kind of like, avoid, you know, Driven by Eternity is such a good, accessible way to encounter with that. What was the other book, Josh? Imagine Heaven. That was there was another book that I think, you know, some of our leadership team read at that time. I haven't personally read it. I don't know if you have. But there's, you know, there are things out there, but that are just really helpful to give us a frame. Yeah.
And I think that with that, this idea that Jesus actually loves to give rewards and that he's gone ahead of us to prepare a place for us in heaven. And I think sometimes we can spend so much time dwelling on, I don't want hell. And it's like, actually, you miss out or misunderstand how incredible heaven is going to be.
Come on.
Death is just a doorway into the next thing that Jesus has. And it's such a greater thing than here on earth. And that Jesus is wanting and eager to reward all of us for the things that we've done with our lives. That there's going to be a greater almost variety of reward and blessing that will come to each one of us depending on the way that we've lived. But it's not just you made it, welcome to the club. Actually, Jesus is like, no, do you know what? I prepared something just for you. Wow. Based on everything that you did. Woo. All of the motives, the way that you lived your life, the way that you loved and valued others, the way that you stewarded what I blessed you with, all the finances,
Wow.
the property. Let me now show you what I prepared for you as a result of the way that you lived. And I think just to encourage every person with that good news is that this is not just a, hey, you made it. This is going to be the most
Come on, that's
mind-blowing,
great, Josh.
incredible blessing that Jesus has for every single one of us that puts our faith in him and follows him and is faithful to him for all the days of our life.
Come on, that is incredible.
So as we close up this podcast, I just wanted to encourage you, go and maybe listen to some of that. Maybe go and listen to Driven by Eternity, or go and read the book. You won't regret it. Spend some time. And I'd love to hear in the coming weeks how that has impacted your life as you spend some time dwelling on that, praying into it, and allowing Jesus to reveal more of himself through that truth. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with another episode.